how inventory valuation works in Intacct. So the reason why I'm doing this is that often after I teach the implementing Intacct class, we go over the core core Intacct applications, the AR, the OE, purchasing, and people understand how that works. But there's often a question with regard to how does inventory valuation works. So this is just a quick explanation for those people, and it's for people that haven't yet attended the implementing inventory training. So my name is William Leung. My job is as a Sage Intacct trainer. This is the date, and this is the version that I'm going to use as a demo. So I'm logged in using Australian English. So in this agenda, what I'm going to talk about is the transaction definitions related to inventory, and I'm also going to give a very, very high level overview of the fulfillment workflow and also the supplies inventory workflow. So let me switch over to my Intacct instance. So I'm connected to Intacct here. And when you subscribe to the inventory application, what number of things happen, including when we go into the items for all the inventory items, there is a costing method. So if I go into that, system's a bit slow. So this is the item type. And if I just edit this, one of these of type inventory, just note that with inventory control, we're keeping track of the different inventory statuses. So is it on order? Is it on hand, on hold, etc.? So we cover all the details of what that means in the training. But basically what I'm trying to say is we keep track of inventory status. And the other thing we do is for valuation, if I go to the advanced tab here, for valuation, sorry, not advanced tab, we have a costing method. So over here, there's a standard costing method. So you learn about the different type of costing methods in the training, but that's one aspect that you need to be able to value your inventory. So the other thing that happens when we subscribe to inventory is we're going to get a set of transaction definitions. So as you know from previous training, those transaction definitions will determine how a transaction behaves. And there's going to be a bunch of transaction definitions for inventory that supports inventory related functionality. So the other thing that happens is that the transaction definitions for order entry and purchasing will also be impacted. So if I go into purchasing now, and I'm just going to go to the transaction definitions here. So I'm in a purchasing transaction, and you know when you purchase something, there is you're going to be receiving inventory. So that's going to increase your inventory valuation. So we're going to be, well, Intacct uses transaction definitions to do that. So what the inventory subscription does is it's going to add functionality that is going to support inventory control. So if I scroll down here, we can see here under inventory control, there's a possibility for you to update what we call inventory total. So each of these totals, you can think of them as representing the status that we saw when we looked at the particular item. So what we can do is we can indicate whether or not we want the value of the inventory to increase or decrease. So you can say increase or decrease. The other thing you can do is you can choose or whether or not you want the quantity to increase or decrease, or whether or not you want the system to increase both quantity and value. So what these inventory totals are going to be used for is to update the inventory sub ledger. So what I mean by that is when you go to inventory and we print reports from inventory, we can see the value of the inventory. We can see the quantity of inventory for particular warehouses. So your choice here will impact those reports. And in the training, there are best practices in how to set up the inventory control. But what I always think about when someone is talking about best practices is what are the assumptions behind the best practices. We shouldn't be blindly following best practices without understanding, you know, their thoughts behind them. So, so we'll learn about best practices in the official training, but just to mention here is that we've got different transaction definitions. So this is the one that represents invoices. So for invoices, we see the value is increasing. And if I just cancel out of this, and I went into the inventory one, I'm just going to the receiver one. And for the receiver, we see that the quantity has, we're increasing the quantity. So the thought behind this may be the fact that, okay, we're receiving something, so our inventory quantity is going to go up, but we're not quite sure what the value or the cost for that inventory is. So we're going to leave the change of the valuation to the invoice. However, you just have to understand the implication of doing something like that is that after you receive inventory and before you receive the invoice, there's going to be some time where the value and the quantity is going to be out of sync. So essentially at this stage, the valuation for the inventory received is going to be zero. So there will be timing issues. Okay, so the other thing is I spoke about this controlling the inventory valuation in the inventory sub ledger. So both the quantity and the value. The other thing where we like to keep track of the inventory valuation is in the general ledger. So that means we need to be posting to the general ledger. And now to post the general ledger, we're going to be setting this to post to GL. So if we're posting to GL, we can see here that we have the increase in the inventory and the credit to, um, you know, like goods received and not invoiced account or something like that, depending on the workflow. Okay, so the other thing that you have to keep in mind is I've shown you the different places where we can update the inventory in the inventory subledger and general ledger as well. So that can be done on any transaction, but the thing that you need to consider is the timing difference. So we can see here, I shouldn't have closed it. Let me go back in. Here we are debiting inventory. So we're going to be debiting inventory. So there's going to be some value in inventory. However, if we go back to the general tab, there's no increase in the valuation. So when you look at reports in GL and the inventory subledger, they will be out of sync. So that's some things that you need to be aware of. The next thing I wanted to show you quickly is how things work in order entry, because it's slightly different, but conceptually it's the same. So if I go into order entry, and I'm just going to go into a um, a transaction here. So let's see, which one shall I go into? So say I go to shipper inventory. And again, this inventory control works in exactly the same way. There's different inventory totals. Then we can choose, in this case, we're selling. So we're going to be subtracting from the, we're going to be subtracting from the inventory. So we can subtract quantity and value. So what I explained for purchasing is exactly the same on the sales side as well. The difference on the sales side is that, let me go to the posting configuration. So on the sales side, there is this special, I shouldn't say special, but there's this extra COGS posting area. This is where you are decreasing the inventory and you might be debiting some expense account like cost of goods sold account. So if I go back to the general tab here, that extra portion you fill in is not going to be related to this transaction posting. Okay, so that's the difference here. There's this extra area where you can specify the cost of goods GL journal entry. So let me just go into the inventory one just to further emphasize that point. So I'm going to go into this sales um, invoice inventory. And if we go to the general tab here, we are going to be posting to accounts receivable. So that's something that you'll be familiar with. And if I go to posting configuration, there is that AR account mapping where we debit AR, the control account, and we credit some revenue account. But there's this extra area where you can, um, you know, impact, define the GL impact on your inventory accounts. So all the order entry transaction definitions will have this extra COGS account mapping thing. Okay, so as with the other areas of Intacct, that from previous training, what we can do is we can go through the process. So we can start with like a sales order and convert that to like a shipper and convert that to an invoice. Now, it's something that you're familiar with when you did the OE and the purchasing training. But with inventory control, there is this possibility for you to enable something called fulfillment. So if I go into the configuration here, we can enable fulfillment. That's going to allow us to um, pick. You can choose, for your sales fulfillment process, you are going to choose the steps that need to be taken. Do you have to pick? Are you going to pack? Do you need that as a separate function? You can untick this, and then you ship and you invoice. So this is the sales fulfillment process. So when you enable this, then Intacct will generate um, transactions definitions for you. And what those transactions definition do is it supports this like this workbench here, and you can access this workbench from order entry because it's a sales thing, or from inventory. So instead of converting in the normal way that you're used to, we can do everything from this fulfillment workbench. Essentially, you're going to be looking at all your sales orders, and you can uh, click and look at the lines and then indicate that they are ready to be picked. So when you do something like that, the items involved are going to be reserved. Okay, and then you can continue to work with this tab, but you can go to the pick tab and you can see things that are ready to be picked. And at that stage, um, you can do things like an assign a picker, and these are other actions that can be taken. So you can do things like print a pick list, and it could be a whole process around picking. So yeah, so there's picking, and then when you're ready to pack, you can indicate that by moving change the action, and just indicating which lines here are ready for packing. Then you can say, okay, I'm going to pack. And incidentally, after you pick something, and you confirm, because right now it's ready to pick, but when you have actually picked it, then that stock will actually be allocated. And one of the inventory statuses or totals that we saw on the inventory screen is there's those totals, but there's this uncommitted total. So you know that there's how much stock you've got available to you to apply to orders. So basically, we're going through this whole workflow, and we're going to do a shipment here and an invoice. So after you've invoiced, then it's going to move out of the fulfillment workflow. Okay, so this is a purely sales side um, tool that you can use. So it's available in the normal subscription. And I mentioned earlier that the system generates the transaction definitions to support this functionality. So if we go here into the system, we can see that not inventory, this would be order entry. Sorry. there's this system generated workflows. So if I edit that, I'm not going to go through all the different fields, but I'm showing you, I just want to show you this flag, enabled for fulfillment. That means this transaction definitions are dedicated or support the fulfillment um, workbench. Uh, okay, you can actually create your own transaction definitions and flag them for the workbench. That is also possible. The other thing that we have available to us is in inventory control. If we go to the configuration, we can configure this supplies inventory. Okay, so I'm not going to configure the supplies inventory, but because there's all these conditions we um, we need. But I just want to give you a quick overview. So with fulfillment, that is the workbench for the sales, but this is for the purchasing side, and essentially it's for organizations that do not sell inventory. And one example of that might be like a cleaning company. So when they do jobs, they do need supplies, and they will invoice their services to um, like the businesses that they clean, but they're not going to sell the cleaning supplies. So, uh, yes. So when they invoice, the services are going to be represented by like non-inventory type items. Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to say is they're not going to be selling any inventory. So the idea is when you subscribe to supplies inventory, the system is also going to generate a bunch of system created transaction definition, which will support a workbench. I haven't activated it, but just imagine a workbench similar to the fulfillment workbench where a purchasing manager could look at all the requisitions. So maybe a requisition will represent someone going out on a cleaning job. They're going to require um, supplies to do that job. So the purchasing manager can look at that and basically they can view, have a look at the inventory status in terms of what is available, and that purchasing manager can issue supplies to that employee that requested the supplies. The other thing they can do is they can just look and decide, okay, we might need to transfer stock from another warehouse. They may decide we need to replenish because the stock is running low. Um, they may need to just create a purchase order to purchase more of that stock. So what I'm trying to say is there is a workbench for you to manage the you know these supplies internally. Yeah. So the important thing here is that um, yeah, you're not going to be selling any of the inventory. Okay. So the last thing I just want to mention about supplies inventory is that you can subscribe to supplies inventory as a standalone. So what I mean by that is you don't have all the full functionality of the inventory control module. You only have the supplies inventory portion. Okay, so that concludes my explanation. So thank you for your attention. And I'm going to stop the recording. Aha, I didn't record.